We are three friends who met in college and now are working in diverse fields across the globe. Curious to know about what our friends are up to. So here we are, connecting, talking, and learning from our friends. In this podcast, we are sharing extraordinary insights from our not so ordinary friends, working in various industries and sharing their stories and their journey so far. These are your hosts, Hiloni Panatar
Atit Kothari
and Tapan Desai.
And this is What the Hat. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss on any episodes. Let me introduce Professor Mayur Parulekar, a wandering, traveling soul who has been teaching at DJ Sanghvi for the past 10 years. Starting at 21, teaching a batch of engineering students who were exactly his age or some even older than him at that time. It seems like it was all yesterday for him. So let's dive into our conversation and know more about his journey with DJs and all the past 10-year batches that he has experienced and what he has to share with all of us today.
Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely great. It's good to connect with all of you guys again. To all the people who would be watching this podcast, a big shout out to everyone who's been alum of DJ Sangvi. And wherever you are, I'm hoping that you're doing an amazing stuff with what you're doing.
Sir, I don't know if you remember this, but I actually first time talked to you back in 2013 when we went to Malvan. Like it was one of those trips that we took on the beach where we stayed for the night, and it was like one of the most amazing experiences. And before that, like every time I talked to any of my friends who had studied under you, they were like, Mayur sir is the best. You need to study under Mayur sir. But I never got the chance to like be in your class. So I'm really happy that I'm getting this opportunity to talk to you.
Glad for that. So possibly, what I feel is you need to be a backbencher to be a really good teacher. So you can't be a front bencher and you can't be a good teacher. That's possibly been my motive right from where I thought studying comes in, is if the last guy gets it, the first guy definitely has to get it. So if you get into that mentality and possibly you start teaching that, okay, the last guy is possibly the guy who I need to work with, then you're automatically working with everyone ahead.
So we know Professor Mayur Parulekar as like the professor in DJ, but we would like to know your story like as a backbencher as well. And we would like to understand like why did you pick engineering as your undergraduate degree and how did your journey start there?
I met very interesting friends. Luckily, I've always ensured that I've got really good friends right throughout 10th, 12th. And one of the reasons why I possibly got into engineering was because the 11th, 12th in where I was preparing for the IIT mains and all, that is somewhere where I got hooked into engineering. Problem was that I did not get into IIT Bombay. But one of the best possible things that happened with me in engineering was that my friend circle, who I'm still connected to today, which could be regular Sunday calls or whatever, these guys were not the set of people who were competitive ever, which means I was taught by my seniors, I was taught by my class group, and surprisingly I used to manage to get more than them at every time, and then they would still teach me. So friends like that you rarely get, but they were absolutely till date my support if I have to learn anything, because I think all of you all would have experienced it's amazing how a student how your friend can teach you than a teacher. Like there is absolutely no way by which a teacher can teach you, and a friend who's possibly always going to be better than the teacher.
The point where you said like you learn more from your friend group itself, like most of my learning in engineering was definitely from, even now actually, like from all my friends and like the links they share, or like when we sit just before the exam and like discuss. So that's the best form of learning, I think.
And the fastest learning is like 2 hours before the paper where the whole revision is happening and suddenly there are few chapters which you learn right then, and you still remember, and you'll put them in the paper.
So basically, after not getting into IIT, I was a bit disoriented for some amount of time, which was like, I just want to get a job, I just want to finish engineering, blah blah blah. So I just selected a college which my mom would drop me off to very easily because it was just on a workplace route. So that's my journey of Vatumal College, where it's sad that that college does not remain anymore. Got shifted to I think somewhere in Ulhasnagar. But the second chapter from there was DJ Sangvi Masters, and uh, again, good experience, but crazy experience. I think some of you all would have witnessed my experience.
When
I
was
mean,
the masters?
so I started with DJ Sangvi. I registered with DJ Sangvi for masters because this became as a compulsory thing in 2011. So six pay commission got introduced in 2010-11, where it became mandatory that you had to do masters if you have to teach. All right. So we were like the first batch of masters at DJ Sangvi. And the only thing that I realized from that particular experience was that no matter how good you are, no matter even if you're a teacher or not, you have to make sure that you have humility, because no matter whether you're a teacher or not, they will screw up your term work. So I mean, trust me, I was the least in term work, even when I was a teacher. So I can't
Oh,
get over the fact that possibly, so we registered, and we were like, the boys were so we had like 9 boys and 9 girls, if I'm not mistaken, in the class, very equal ratio. And all the 9 guys were always outside. We were always thrown outside for some apparent reason.
And this was during DJ Sangvi.
This was during
yeah.
DJ Sarvi. So I think the Elex people would be knowing this really well, because they would always see me thrown outside the class. But that's one of the most possible learning experiences for me. That however good you are, if you're humble enough and you have that humility in you, where you know that possibly something ahead of you is going wrong, but you still take it in the right stride, and you don't push it to them on their face, I think you can still do phenomenally well with with the class as well as the teachers. And you protect your interest, whatever vested interest they may, in this case possibly marks. But even today, I always feel the same thing, that if I would have done that differently, I think I would have made much better marks. But again, no worries, because I'm still a DJ.
But sir, circling back to like taking up masters and wanting to pursue teaching, like how did it jump from being like a top achiever in your engineering degree to probably not doing a master's international or an MBA, or picking up like a mainstream job that most of us take up in a tech company or an IT company?
So I think if you ask my teachers in school or college that, Mayur became a professor, half of them would die of a heart attack and half of them would head into coma. That is for sure. So the thing was that I was really good at these robotics workshops and all that you all used to hold during Trinity time and all of those kind of things. Pulse Parichay ke time pe.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yes.
So I used to do that a lot in my college. So I was also a part of that robotics society, and at that place I realized that I could hold a class really well. So I was one of those people who, you push me in a crowd of possibly 200 people, and I would still be able to hold a workshop with that same tenacity that possibly you would hand me 10 people or 20 people. So I had that uh, going for me. And in the seventh semester, when I was in college, so my head of department was sick for some days, and I asked her, can I take your class for this particular time? uh, and she agreed for that, and I was teaching her class for half a semester. So this was something that was there in the back of my mind. All right, this was something that was back of my mind. Now, how a career decision was made. So, like everyone, 2009 when I graduated from Guatemala, this was the peak year of crisis, all right? The 2008 2009 crisis that had happened. So almost everyone's job offer was rescinded, except mine and I think 3 or 4 people. Okay. Now, where does my DJ Sangvi connection start? I was at DJ Sangvi for a pool placement that happened for DJ Sangvi, for Vatamal, for Thadumal Shani, for VJTI, and for SP. And the company called Core Services, which was basically an offshoot of Oracle Services, which was what came in from the US to hire 1 people from 5 colleges. So there were, I think, total, luckily they got in 3 people out of 5 colleges that had. And the pool placement happened at DJ Sangvi. So I came in DJ Sangvi and I was like, freak man, this college has staff lounge and AC classrooms. And then I remembered Vatumal and I was like, shit, I'm eating 10 rupees ka samosa and all of that nonsense. And here you are where all classrooms and everything. So it was like because the interview happened at one of the staff lounge, the computer staff lounge. And I was fascinated by the college. So I got in over there. 6 months I joined on 15 July at Core Services again. So basically Oracle put me over there as a client manager over there. So what happened over there was that I used to go to office almost 6 o'clock in the morning. I used to leave from there, from my house, and I would return back, trust me, not before 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, the work was more than I would put in, almost like, because I was from a telecom background. So even after, so the moment I finished off my engineering, I was like, I have absolutely no clue of what is Oracle, first of all. And so I did my certification before I even joined the company. And I was like, okay, let's understand how this is going. And I pushed in, like the start May, how everyone does the crazy amount of workers. I realized that I was, having lunch at possibly 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, and I would not even remember it. And my off days were Wednesday, Thursday. All right. So in the 6 months that I was there over there, I lost somewhere around 10, 12 kgs. People had stopped seeing me at all. I had no social life. And my parents had absolutely not seen me, because by the time I would get home, they would go to sleep. By the time they were awake, I would have already left for office. And that is where it ticked me that, I got my promotion. And the day I got my promotion was also the day I got my result. And in the result, it said that you topped the college and you were in the top 10 in the university. And that was the day I put in. So I got my promotion and I put in my papers. I was like, I'm not doing this. If I'm good like this, I'm not doing this. And 10th of Jan 2010, I put in my papers. Before that, I was like, so I had this idea that I would possibly want to do an MBA, because I realized that I have everything that an MBA school would teach. I already had those kind of skills in me. The only thing I needed was a good fancy degree to sell that particular thing. At that point, I realized that, I need some time to study for CAT and all of those kind of things, because my first attempt was somewhere around 94, 95. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give this one more attempt and let's figure out if I can get into a good, decent school. The fact was that I thought that possibly, teaching is the most simplest job. Why not do teaching? So, of course, I had, the fact that I had Vatumal students in my head and I had Vatumal teachers in my head, right? So for me, teaching was very easy, because all you had to do was, do nothing,
Right.
and you would still be doing a very good job. So with that particular concept in my head, I was like, okay, let's take a time for 6 months. The safest bet would be to wait up as a teacher. I thought of giving an interview. So the first person who I came to was A.R. Joshi, sir. A.R. Joshi, sir, refused to believe me that a person who's topped, who's got this particular salary, wants to come into teaching. So he flatly refused my resume. He was like, I am not going to even believe for a fraction of a second that you want to come into teaching, right? So he pushed me to the fifth floor electronics and telecom department, where I had one more professor who told me that I don't think so we have any vacancy in our department, but you can definitely go to the third floor electronics department. And over there I found a little girl who happens to be Joshi sir's daughter, Pallavi Joshi, who's the daughter of my current head of department, Prasad Joshi sir. So she was just playing games over there, and I was like wondering, who's this out over here? And she was like, "Nee, dad has gone out over there for a washroom. The moment he comes back, I'll connect you." And I was like, "Okay." I was just waiting over there, and this person walks in, and I told him that this is how it is, and so and so. And he told me, "Okay, let's pick up an interview date," and because there was vacancy surprisingly in the department, and I immediately said yes for an interview. Within 3 days, I had an interview with Hari sir, Daptadar sir, and two other HODs, one of whom is my HOD currently. And all of them flatly refused to believe that I'm going to take up a job in engineering, job in teaching for 6 months. So they saw my resume, and I was like, "No, you are not going to stay over here." So I had this in my head that, okay, everyone knows over here that I'm going to leave. So there's nothing, big difference that is going to happen. But surprisingly, I got that job. So 25th Jan, I think 15 days after serving my notice period, Sunday was the day when I served my last notice period, and 24th Jan, which was that, and 25th Jan, I was supposed to teach at DJ. Now, teaching at DJ, if you realize, I was 21 then, all right? So I am 1988 batch, and I was 21 at that time. Okay, and I entered DJ Sangvi, and I had to teach 2 subjects which I had never studied on my own. Now, if you even talk to the first batch, even today, they will not for a second tell you that this person walked into our class not knowing a word what he said. They will still tell you that everything that he taught us was absolutely brilliant. The reason was that I used to get up at almost 4 every day. So the crazy work hours that I put in at my prior office helped me with the fact that I could, do superhuman hours in teaching. So I used to get up at 4, and I used to study every day in my notice period, because I had none of these 2 subjects that I'd ever studied. And you're telling them to teach students of DJ Sangvi who are also 21, right? And I was like, okay, this is an eye opener. And I realized that if they are going to question me, I need to be really good. And trust me, till today, I still carry the same particular aspect that if I have to teach someone, I have to be really good, because I'm going to ask those same doubts that I'm going to have are the exact doubts that those students are going to ask me. And for you have no clue, but every scary day that used to pass, I was studying like, crazy hours. But at this point, I realized that now there is absolutely no subject that you can't pick up. So you tell me that tomorrow I have to teach somebody C programming. All I would need is a good book and some resources, and I would start teaching that subject. I mean, that's how this particular thing happened of teaching, where, out of the blue, you're preparing for something else. And I loved the students so much because of the fact that, at 21, you suddenly have a class full of friends. So I realized that if I try to be a professor, I'm going to be one of those same nuts that I always used to avoid. So I'm going to try to be something that I would not see in a professor. And these 50, 60 odd people suddenly became my social group, to the fact that my birthday was celebrated by them at Juhu at 12 o'clock. So they pulled me out. So I danced at their farewell party. These guys took me out on a birthday party at 12 o'clock, right, on Juhu. And I still remember all of these people like it was yesterday. I mean, I still have their photos and all of those kind of things. And to be, a friend and not a professor, and all of these guys at any point still calling me or saying a hi, was just good enough to remember that okay, you can build a bond with every successive batch if you want to, or you can get away from all of this by taking a standard corporate job which you just moved out from. And those 6 months made me realize that possibly this is where I want to wait. And it's been 10 years now that I'm still waiting at that place.
And that's a very impressive story. And like, I want to add that we as like, even for myself, like as a 18-year-old or even 19-year-old, we don't realize how much preparation does each professor do for the lectures they take. And your story just reinforces that, like how much preparation goes. And because we, like when we enter the class, we are not even paying attention or doing anything. And then at this point, after graduating, like after 6 years of graduating, we realize how much time and effort like teaching takes, and like how much preparation also is required for each class. I just wanted to ask to you, sir, like you said that you can pick any subject and like you can learn about it. So like, what is your process of learning about a new subject? Like, how do you go about it?
Okay, so I think those two subjects taught me that possibly you can pick up something if you've got the right source, which means that you need the right books, you need the right content if you want to really do your job well. So engineering taught me one very clear thing, that there is no answer of anything in one particular book. So the moment I have to pick up a new subject, the first thing that I head out to is a library, right, where I possibly will find out what are the best possible sources out. So I still am good with books. I mean, with all the online content that's still there, I still, you have these beautiful foreign authors, professors from different universities. So if you realize how a foreign professor writes a book, as opposed to how अपना जो tech max है, what's the difference is that I mean, you all have now been to brilliant universities in your lifetime, and you've realized that these professors take almost 2 to 3 years of sabbatical to write brilliant pieces of information, and their books are like a story. I mean, you would want to read it like, okay, this guy is just telling some things and he's telling some things and he's continuing and he's continuing, and he's telling you concepts which you would possibly think that, okay, this, if somebody else would have done this in some random question answer format, you would have never thought of this, this is what is the outcome or the crux of that particular concept that he was trying to teach. And that is one of the fundamental points where I start. And now with this digital media, wherein you get courses for free. I mean, right now, if all you have to do is just type Python, and possibly you've got W3 schools, you've got programmers and all of these who would just throw you out the most simplest way to learn a language. I mean, if somebody would have told me that C was that simple at that time, possibly I would have never been scared for a majority part of engineering, where I was like, nahi, thank God I did not take comms engineering. So for me, it's one, books, second, the content, and third, putting it down in the most simplest examples, day-to-day examples. So if I'm teaching a course, say embedded systems, all right, and I start just with I've got ARM processor, and I've got this, and I've got that, and I've got scheduling functions and blah blah blah, the students would have been dropping dead by the minute, right? With afternoon lectures, especially after lunch and all, that half of them would be dead. So you have to get something into class which possibly, one, ensures that you are giving them examples that they can relate to on a day-to-day basis. So, if I had to teach a bunch of kids who had no idea of what engineering is, if I take that to the IQ level and then I start teaching, that is where I feel that, okay, I am making people understand something that would possibly go above their heads.
So you also mentioned like online courses. Do you have like a special list of people who have their courses listed somewhere, maybe like Coursera or even YouTube? Do you have a list of those? Some
So something that I'm learning right now is Tableau. That's a data analytics tool that I picked up some time back. So I think I mean this is something that possibly a lot of alums would also not know. DJ Sangvi became autonomous last year. All right. So now we've moved out from the Mumbai University syllabus, which means that we basically make or break whatever the image of the college is based on what we are now going to project. So the moment it became autonomous, we realized that you have to introduce something more interesting. So currently, IBM is on board with us for 3 courses. The first one being machine learning and artificial intelligence. The second course that they've introduced is IoT, and the third course that they've introduced is data analytics. So this is where I thought, and again, possibly next year you would see a new branch called as computer science with data sciences happening at DJ Sangvi. All right, so that's news for you all. So again, news which is still not being disclosed. So you've got this particular branch, and I felt that possibly you have to be somewhere ahead of the game if you're going to be again teaching a good set of people. So Tableau was something that I picked up. One of the most interesting tools that I have come across in a very long period of time, where you have data which could be possibly lakhs of rows, or which could be tens of thousands of rows on servers or Excel sheets. At one point of time, MBA, I believed, was only two things: can you work with an Excel sheet, and second thing, can you make a good presentation? And I think Tableau does the same job, where you have a really good presentation software which is analyzing phenomenal amount of stuff, and it is throwing out data to you which you would possibly have to train a new joinee. If it would take somebody who would have Python or one of these particular skills, would possibly take 2 or 3 months to get on board to what analysis you require. I think with Tableau, where I took a basic session for all my students, during this particular time, you can just start off with this tool, and you won't believe, within possibly 5 days, I have 8 or 9 people, 8 or 9 groups which have applied that, okay, sir, we want to do a project in data analytics. So the tool itself made the fact that it was so simple that, okay, this is something that everyone can pick up as something which could either land them with a job, or second thing, would land them with something that they could start on their own. So Tableau, I think, one of the most brilliant tools I've felt so far. The second thing, I think, one of the courses that everyone should do on Coursera, two of them actually. One is Introduction to Negotiation. I think, Hiloni, this would be one of those courses that you should actually do. Considering that you talk on a very daily basis to clients around the world, right? And it plays a phenomenal role of how you negotiate with somebody on the other side of the table. Right. So, Introduction to Negotiations, this is a course by Yale, which is on Coursera right now, and I found that to be brilliant. And the second one was Artificial Intelligence by Andrew Ng, Introduction to AI by Andrew Ng. Again, very interesting for somebody who's possibly picking up AI, because currently, if you've heard about schools, all right, IB schools, IGSE schools, all of these guys are introducing AI, robotics, machine learning in 8th, 9th, 10th standard. I mean, I would have never thought of what I mean. I have worked from 6th to 10th on a 64 kbps bandwidth, so we would have definitely not imagined what was machine learning. But given the fact that today these people are at such good maturity and such good exposure, schools can offer so much more, that gets students to choose that, do I want to go to commerce, do I want to go to science, do I want to go to arts, what do I want to do, is already there in front of them. Like, you have already been moved out from the basic fundamentals of you need a teacher to learn. Right. I think that's the way forward in all of these cases. If
And
I
regarding, I can attest to like Tableau being very helpful. Last year, they started a program called Digital Accelerator, where they started training from partners below, like directors, managers, everyone in data analytics and data visualization. And Tableau was one of the tools that every partner, like they were 50, like we had partners who were 55 years old, 60 years old. They had to learn, and they had to learn how to make dashboards and how to present the dashboards to our clients. So Tableau is one of the most important tools, I would say, that is being taught, and is one of the most important softwares that any student or professional could learn at this point. So, sir, I wanted to ask, like, since DJ has been autonomous now, like, what are some of the changes that have been brought in the college and the curriculum itself?
So we are taking actually things very slow, because at this point, you getting autonomy just does not mean you randomly start moving in all directions, because it's new to us. We realize that slowly. So each department has a department advisory board. So we have Dr. Farooq Qazi from VJTI. We've got Dr. Datta Gupta from IIT Bombay, who and certain industry people who are helping us with the process of finalizing the syllabus. But we are doing it still 1 year at a time, which means that uh, this is the first year of autonomy. So they have introduced Python, and we are splitting up the particular thing that a computers guy need not necessarily learn motors or EDC or ECAD, or IT people need not learn all of those things. So what we are trying to do is initially just weed out something that's not there in the syllabus, and then we are trying to create focus points, which means that if I give you an example of what's happening in electronics, all right. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to create tracks, which means that if somebody wants to do communication networks, so there's a track called the communications track, where your subjects would move towards the CCN and computer communication networks and digital communication. So your subjects would move possibly in that particular way. Then there is a embedded systems track, which means that you would learn about microprocessors, microcontrollers, DSP processors, the NVIDIA GPU processors. Then you've got one track which is the computer track, which means that this moves very parallel to the ECE program of US universities, where you move in electronics, but you're moving towards data structures, DBMS, again AI machine learning. So in successive semesters, you basically move your subjects in such a way that you choose a track which actually appeals to you. So you've got a sub track within the whole course. So I'm doing electronics engineering per se, but I'm moving towards a track which could possibly be either IoT side, either it could be machine learning and data analytics side. So each department is trying to find a focus point and a divergence point, right? But it's very nascent to even say that where, because it's taking one step at a time of thinking okay, we need to do this first in the first year, then possibly this in the second year. Because if you realize that the faculty also needs to be trained in that way, right? Suddenly I introduce data structures in electronics. I have to make sure that my department has the skill set to teach data structures, right? I can't just keep bringing professors from different departments and tell them okay, you teach, but I have this in my department. So as of right now, what each department is trying to do is possibly improve their skill set, and at the same time introduce something on a new basis one semester at a time, so that that particular set of people have their skill set renewed every time. So you could have people in the electronics department who would possibly start learning data structures as of now.
I wish I started engineering now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think masters would become like a void now if engineering degree itself gives you like such in-depth knowledge. I believe people would already identify and probably be ready for industry then picking up another master's into that specific field?
I think the demographics will change because one, I see a lot of I think it's come to a saturation point where all industries have realized that, boss, if nothing's good happening in colleges, then we are not going to, I mean, with the current situation, they would definitely not pick up just general set of graduates, like how possibly a TCS would pick up a 150 or a 200 number. It is just going to pick up 10 people who are really good and get the work done. So I think with students also, the focus point would start changing. And at the same time, I am really in the know that possibly in the 5 years that I'm going to look ahead at in teaching, there is not going to be anyone who says that, look, I want to do this only and I want to do that only. There is somebody who's going to learn from these online courses directly. I mean, they would not need particularly teachers per se at all, other than the fact that they want to do, get a graduation degree from somewhere. But the skill set development, I think every focused individual would get it on their own itself.
Wow. I mean, that's a very interesting point and something I was actually wanting to ask, like, with the open source knowledge that is available, I mean, how do we see, like, at least in terms of curriculum, we see that now colleges are looking at adapting a quicker change in their curriculum. But overall, like, what do you think with the whole corona situation as well and people taking up remote learning as a mandatory right now? I mean, so how do you vision a university being in future, and what would be the core reasons people would actually want to come to an institute versus doing everything on an e-learning basis?
So possibly, I think the change makers would not be the universities. It will be a force that will be an external force, which is what the companies will dictate. So I see the fact that a graduate no longer remains a graduate degree because of the fact that if I have now, if you realize that if you had to recruit someone, would you look at okay, this guy has got 80% in his engineering, or would you look at the fact that okay, he's got a Tableau certification, he's got possibly data analytics with Python, he's got this, and he's done those certifications. Do I hire an 80% wala guy, or do I hire a person with these certifications? So in the possible next few years, I see that the whole demographics of, until and unless the colleges don't reinvent themselves, they are the next dinosaurs.
And like that also brings to one question that I wanted to ask. Like we whenever we sit up with our friends and we are discussing like education system, and you would be surprised that we do that more often than you would think. One thing that keeps popping up is like Mumbai University hai, so it's theoretical. And then if you went for your master's or did education abroad, it's all practical knowledge. So like, do you have an insight, like what is driving that, and like what can we, like, I realize that we are already changing that, but what else can be done to change the structure of university program itself? And what is stopping us from doing that?
Actually, two things. One, the university is actually taking steps very much in that direction, and that's the reason why you see so many autonomous colleges as of right now. So if you've realized, SP has become autonomous, DJ Sangvi has become autonomous, KJ Somaiya has become autonomous, almost every other college has started becoming autonomous, which means that Mumbai University is trying to decentralize. At the same time, what has also changed is that there is also a university which is coming up, which is specifically going to look only into technical colleges, which means engineering colleges. So there is currently a university in the making, which will have all of these autonomous engineering institutions under their umbrella, which possibly I think could be one of those places where each college then becomes responsible. Because if you look at a comparison, this is a comparison that I always hold good. VJTI and COEP, all right, these were two top par colleges when I was in engineering, and the moment they got autonomy, all right, one of them dropped down its standards, and one of them increased the standards like crazy. So now the onus actually falls on the college of what kind of progressive policies do they want to put in place, or do they just want to give students marks to just give 90% and everyone is like a stupid person with 90%. The second thing is that you need to have really good teachers. There is absolutely no substitute to having good teachers. And if that means the way Reliance does it, that in their school where you would poach possibly from every other school the best paying teachers and all of that, and then let's assume that you've got all the best teachers. It's something that every possible university or every possible college needs to do in terms of if they want relevance for their college. Because right now, if you see the stats for engineering, the engineering stats itself are dropping down like crazy. So engineering has already become obsolete because of the fact that imagine that you're paying 6 or 7 lakhs to graduate and you end up with a job of 3.5. Does that make any sense? It's never going to make any sense. So TCS and Infosys, from the time that I graduated 2009, it had come up at that time to our colleges with a package of 3.3, 3.4. Until possibly last year or before that, it still comes up with a package of 3.4, 3.5. Which means 10 years down the line, things have not changed because they realize that the value of the people who we are getting are still the same 10 years back. So if you want the college to possibly, get those set of students, it has to be progressive. One, the faculty needs to be checked like crazy. I don't think anyone is going to come to your college, or it would just be, the random cattle class crowd kind of thing where सब लोग झुंड में आओ, सिर्फ सर्टिफिकेट लो और निकलो, and you are possibly not having again any employment after that.
Absolutely, I think so. Very well put, all your points. But also, so what is like your take on like having more industry professionals and people who are probably more new age careers as well? Because like the kind of things that you told, the curriculum that we are looking at introducing data analytics and IoT, we see a lot of new age startups also doing this, apart from our very fashion TCS, Infosys, all of them picking this up. So, I mean, what is your take on having more industry people coming down, teaching and kind of giving students more insights on what could be the kind of courses or what could be the kind of certifications they would be looking at, and adding that, and more than that also like internships as a mandatory. I would say more than like just one internship in the entire curriculum, like more than like 2-3 internships to understand what really is it that you are passionate about when you actually are graduating from your engineering, and discovering it after that is a little too late now. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Right. So I think when it comes to people who are currently in the industries, I feel that it's like a moral a compulsion that you have to get back to schools and colleges, because what I would consider a generation gap, which was possibly earlier in my when I was graduating, I would say that it would be a decade gap for that particular thing. That generation gap has fallen down to 1 year per generation, which means the last year's batch is now obsolete, and that's how the information is progressing. So at this point, I feel that until and unless the people who are at the top of their game, all right, and if the colleges, so it has to be a hand-in-hand process where the college and the college is first of all open, and it realizes that I can't teach everything. It has to be somebody brought in better. So you have these schools like JBIMS and all, where they bring in those beautiful set of people who are at the top of their game, and they tell the students that, okay, there's going to be a lecture tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the night. You have to be there. As simple as that. Because the person who's coming down over there is possibly the best. Every particular school or college needs to go forward that you get in the experts. I never feel the fact that you have to charge for a course. you can keep whatever course fees the person wants if the person is of that caliber. I mean, I would go into a class and I could sell a particular person so well that the whole class would possibly buy that person if that person is that good at delivering. Which means, I'll give you a very simple example of that. This was something that I pitched to Viraj Sheth and Ranveer Alabadi at this point of time, where I asked Viraj to start off a course in digital marketing for students at DJ. So there is absolutely no better person who would teach digital marketing than the person who's possibly opened an agency and a channel and who's doing really well.
So I wanted to ask one question that is like close to all of our hearts, which is attendance. So I wanted to ask, why was attendance a matrix and why was it so important? Because at the end of the day, like if the student wants to learn, they will learn, right? Was there a back end process that the teachers had to report or something like that? Or I just never understood why was it made such a big deal?
It is actually, if you realize, so this is something from the student end as well as the professor's end. From the professor's end, I'll give you the particular year, because considering the fact that also that I was not good at my attendance, all right. One of the major factors that happens is that if you've not attended in link, right, you will not get what has happened in between. Okay, so this is, I'm talking about a good professor who's teaching well, all right. So I'm not talking about the set of people who you would not want to attend whose lecture. So I'm going to give you a other set of reasoning for that particular thing. But the fact that, you know, if there's a good professor who's teaching and you come to a class after 3 lectures, all right, you've not attended 3 lectures for whatsoever reason, let it be X, Y, Z. The fact is that you are not going to get anything in the class after the 3rd lecture, right? Which means that you basically lost the train of thought, and at that point you are just going to get out for that 1 hour for that attendance. Now that becomes challenging for the professor also, because he's dealing with a set of people who are not going to be interested in the course and who are possibly going to cause a certain havoc in his train thought mind. And the second thing is that when you're standing in front of a class of possibly 60 or 70 people, out of which let's assume that 50 of the set of people are like that, can you imagine the influence that it would have on the 20% of the remaining 20 out of the 70 people who would possibly have sat for all the courses? So that one of the reasons why this was introduced was possibly with the good sense that all teachers are supposed to be good, and I would vouch for that only till my school. The same thing when it comes to college education, what happens is that you are given that particular liberty where you may or may not attend a lecture. Now if it's a good professor, which means if it's a professor, let us assume that I walk into a class and I see 10 students or 15 students, I don't feel like teaching at all, until and unless, so I still don't take attendance whatsoever, right? But I have till date had the faith in my teaching that even if I don't take attendance, I have out of 75 people, 60 people teaching in, 60 people attending, right? That's possibly because of the fact that one, the professor has to have that particular effort that he's put in, that okay, these students are going to come back to the next lecture. And the second point comes in from the perspective of having some sort of discipline in the department, which means I'll give you a very clear example of what's happening right now in final year of every department in the college. Now there is an unsaid word that kuch hone wala nahi hai. All right, so there's nothing going to happen if you don't attend, and that has percolated down the batch. Now, because of that, in final year, can you imagine that a head of department's lecture would have just 5 or 6 people throughout the day? He's the head of department or he's some random professor. But if you can dare to put up, not coming in a class which is going to be taken up by the head of department, you may as well not come for any class. And that has actually happened a lot now, where attendance per se 75%. So if you'll realize that none of you all ever would have made 75%, right? It was just an unspoken rule कि हमको सिर्फ ये इंश्योर करना है कि अगर 75 बोला तो कुछ ना कुछ तो करेंगे लोग, otherwise people will just not turn up, and that is the case that is happening in throughout the 4th years. Now this could be for GRE, or their focus point would have changed, or they are preparing for placements whatsoever, but if I compare the same with the batches that I taught earlier, this was never the case. So when it percolates that attendance है तो क्या मतलब attendance is just a formality, at that point nobody is going to attend in, and then you basically don't have teachers who are ever going to class, so that falls apart. You don't have students in class, you don't have teachers in class, then there is at some point the management has to kick in that okay, look, we need to set the business in order. So you have this particular set that everyone abides by. So our management is possibly at the forefront of the attendance devil process, and it's still happening. I mean, we still do the 75% thing and blah blah blah, but never been productive. I mean, 2010 and 2020, you force attendance and you get dead bodies in class which are still physically present and mentally they're possibly somewhere out.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing the perspective from your side, right, from a professor's side, I think I have much more appreciation to how delicate this system is. Like you change, you either increase, you have the 75% limit, you don't have 75% limit, could have like second order consequences, which feeds into the system. It's a difficult problem to solve. I have much more appreciation about it.
Yeah, it's a very difficult problem to solve, because imagine the fact that a professor is walking into an empty classroom. There's absolutely no job that he has to do. I mean, why is he even in the classroom if there is nobody in the class? So either you really suck at teaching and that's the reason why nobody is there, or you have given up on the system where you've put in no discipline in place. So I'm using the word discipline because of the fact that at some point of time, if you don't put things in order, they can create a much more bigger havoc. So even if you would want to teach, let's say something important, you have like 4 students and you'd like chuck it here, you'll do this on your own, I'll give you the notes. So that possibly has destroyed even the morale of the professor, and there could be also some set of people who would take advantage of that and who would just give notes and who would not teach. So I think a professor's job has always been something of you got to have self integrity every day you're reporting to the job, otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
Also, sir, like right now in the times of corona, and I mean everybody in a lockdown situation working from home and studying from home, I believe. I mean, how has this transition been for DJ Sanghvi and overall professors, and like how have we taken up this challenge to make sure the education is still being imparted to the students, be it virtual learning?
Possibly. So I'm not still on the fact that students have definitely picked up a lot on virtual learning in terms of courses where they realize that okay, Coursera has given them a free learning license for till 31st of July, which is actually a really good initiative from the part of all of these sites which are online MOOC institutions basically. The reason being is possibly this would have been their biggest market. I mean, at this point of time, they would have made all the crazy money by just charging whatever courses they wanted. But they've actually done a job where they pushed everything for free. And because one person pushed it for free, almost everyone has done that. Like Class Central Online, Udemy, Coursera, almost every particular set of MOOC courses has given this. Now, saying that, there are still the set of people who have not realized the gravity of the situation, and I've never blamed students for that, because at 19 or 20 or 21, you are not in that state of maturity to understand what happens to, I mean, how happiness gets screwed up after you graduate. So where you have to earn your daily pay, and you've got to have a house and you've got to pay for the house and blah 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 things. So when it comes to this point of time, I think when I communicate with all my students, I've done a very simple job. I've told them, one, you either pick up projects which you feel that it's going to be worth talking to your next employers about. The second thing, it has to give you some sort of satisfaction where you're going to move ahead after you graduate, because of the fact that possibly now, when I look at DJ Sangvi, I mean, I can't even dare to look at other colleges at this point of state, because what's going to happen is, so I'm already in connect with the batch that has already passed out, right? So this is the current batch which will pass out, and the batch which has already passed out 1 year ahead. So some of them had deferred their US admissions and they were supposed to go this year, and that's the reason why they were preparing 1 year for the masters, GRE and all of those kind of things. There were a lot of people who had to resign from their jobs, and there are a lot of people who now have to defer their master's plans, which means that you have already a saturated set of people who have been laid off by their current employers. You have one fresh batch of graduates who are already out and who will be out in the next possible 1 month, and who will be having their offers rescinded by their employers. And you will then have a new batch which is going to go into the fourth year. So until and unless the students are themselves scared the shit out of them, that okay, this is going to be a very tricky situation where I have to be possibly the best for somebody to employ me, till the time that sinks in, they're going to be in a vacation period. So I still assume that the students possibly have picked up some of it, but they still haven't gained the gravity of the situation as to how this would pan in. So like how we say, you can't have all your eggs in one basket. You have to have all your eggs in every different basket that possibly the world has, because once you go out from a steady income, you need to figure out what's your next source that possibly nets you money other than this particular fixed income. It's a massive situation, because right now, I mean, you look at possibly, I mean, I like to read in terms of the newspapers. I mean, this is the longest time that I've been without a newspaper. It's possibly 2 months that I've not touched a newspaper. That's like the most craziest thing that has happened in my life, at least. Where you don't read what's happening on the Economic Times, what's happening on the general scale of political discussions and all of that. And I realize that the every time that I look at LinkedIn or any of these particular sources, I see a lot of DJites, just clicking up on the fact that, my job offer has got rescinded from so and so company, and I'm now open to opportunities. And this is happening throughout US. Right? I mean, if you're in India, it's still not scary because you still have your parents and all of that, blah, 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 which, you'll can have a support system. But people who are, on tenterhooks with their H-1B visas and all of those kind of things, it is so scary if you don't get that job before your H-1B expires. And that is where I feel that, okay, if you can play the job of a connect and get somebody on board for anything whatsoever as the opportunity, I think you've done a good job. That's all that possibly is right now situation.
Also, sir, like you said that you graduated from engineering when it was again a very not a very similar, but a time of recession in the country. So, do you have like any positive thoughts or things that you practice which probably students can do right now, with the ones that are graduating or the ones that are in between jobs and not able to figure out what would their next move be?
I think if you have to be ahead of the game, the only possible thing that ever put me ahead of the game was I read a lot. I mean, I remember the fact that at any point of time, whether it be debates or anything, right at school competitions or college competitions, one thing that I had was the newspapers. So I was, if you tell me about, you as an ex-person want to talk to me about politics, I can hold a conversation with you. At the same time, if somebody is in the financial sector and he says that he wants to hold a conversation on some certain topics, I could still easily just move on from politics and move into the economic domain. So one of the reasons why I felt that I could be comfortable with anything was because of the fact that reading puts a lot of perspective in people, and possibly it's like the most dead pool of knowledge that anyone can gather at a time when you are sitting at home. So books, newspapers, and possibly a lot of reading does the wonders that I feel. So I'll tell you, I got in my job because of the fact that my group discussion, I still remember. So when I got employed, this was told to me by my US team and the India team, that the moment we heard you in group discussion was the time that we decided that you're going to be hired. We just put you through rounds of interviews because we just wanted to know you better. So something that I have failed to ever understand is the group discussions and interviews that happen at our college. And I really feel sorry for a lot of students, because irrespective that you all had these business communication and ethics and all of those kind of things, people have still never learned the art of doing a group discussion or giving an interview. Something that possibly everyone should look into is soft skills is something that wins you over an edge above the other people, I think.
Yeah. And talking about like talking, interviewing and things like that, like I never thought about it as a skill until the time I moved to the US, and where like we moved there in August, and by September there were companies coming in for us to have internships and things like that. And their career services in the universities there, like they helped us interview how do you talk to the employers or your interviewers, what you should be saying, what you should be avoiding, and things like that. And that's when I realized like this is something that I should have picked up earlier, because in DJ, like I realized that I wanted to do my master's, so I never took the interview process seriously. So after that, like when you go outside of India and when you have to actually sit for interviews in a different country, you realize that you have not learned something that that is very key.
And I think, see, I think, that's one of the reasons why I tell all my students actually to always head to masters. It's because of the fact that you realize that what you've been doing for this amount of time is not necessarily the right thing, which means I always feel that when I compare Mukesh Patel students and I compare DJ Sanghvi students, our students possibly beat them at every particular game except one. If you realize the very simple thing that happens in their placement process, or be it NMIMS, they will come for an interview always in suits. Okay. Now, this possibly does not sound great when you first look at it. But if you realize when Morgan Stanley is offering you possibly a 12 lakh or a 20 lakh package, do you think they are looking for people who are just coming out in a shirt and pant? They're definitely not looking at those kind of people. They're looking at people who possibly aspire to be, one of them. And it has to show in every particular thing, right from the fact that even if you're not told that you need to have a suit with you, you still wear one of your best things to go out on an interview with Morgan Stanley. I mean, that is something that I have failed to understand at DJ, even at this point, when I try to tell people, you really need to change your game if you want to be hired by these people. I mean, that's something which possibly when you head out to masters and then you realize, okay, everyone's wearing a suit for a placement process and everyone is doing everything in the formal way, and I need to do the same. And that is when it clicks you that, okay, in those particular time, if I would have done those particular things in a different way, I think I would have got a really good job. I mean, I remember this guy, Monik Pamecha, who's right now in US. He graduated from Berkeley. Yeah, I mean, that is something. And of course, then you have to be that level of brilliance, right? But at the same time, you have to be that sharp and that perfect for that process, that, okay, he or she is gonna pick me no matter what. But this just adds flair to you. Like everyone would agree that if you watch Suits, right, you have Gabriel marked over there, and the Harvey Specter basically, and you realize that he's classy, right? He's classy, absolutely classy. I mean, that you walk into a room with such kind of a person, and you know that somebody has arrived that way. DJ, I think the only time when somebody wears an iCard and a suit was basically during either Pulse or Parichay.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. When you said suit and DJ, I think that was the first image that came to my head.
So if you realize, I mean, something that means so much to you, you would give it your best. If you realize that, there was nobody who was telling you that you need to come dressed up in a suit for Pulse or Parichay, but every single person was proud to do that I am going to flaunt this particular iCard of the festival, and I'm going to wear my best particular thing. That was something that just came into your, and that's something that possibly needs to translate into even when you're going for a job, because possibly that's what you're going to do, and that is where the person has come in to pick you up.
We just wanted to dive outside of the whole Mayur sir education system perspective and wanted to see like what do you do, like who is Mayur Parulekar outside of academia? Like we know that you love to travel and things like that. So can you talk more about that?
Coming to, I think travel possibly has been, I think, one of my fortunate things where, again, the love for, meeting new people, making new connects is what I felt. So if you realize that all of you all still remember that trip, and I think that will be successive batches, that all of them remember that place. I mean, I would expect everyone to remember Goa, but I don't expect everyone to remember even the word Malvan. The fact that you'll remember it, that itself says that possibly, these were points where I myself did not realize that, there could be something that could come out of it. And for me, it was just like, you're traveling with a bunch of people who are as crazy as you are, who just want to travel and who cannot travel by themselves because their parents are not just going to allow them. But if they have a professor by their side, they can just head to any damn place, and their parents are going to be allowing them. Until this date, you won't believe the places that I have traveled, just because it gives you that liberating feeling. I mean, I traveled. This is something from the parents that came in, because we traveled so extensively throughout. I mean, when there was nothing on the social media front, right? So we traveled where Ladakh. I remember the first time I went was a bunch of just foreigners, 25 people in a bus, where the bus was going from Kashmir to Ladakh. It took 2 days to reach over there, right? And the only possible place that you would sleep in between was a 30 rupee dormitory where all the foreigners stayed out over there. Ladakh was just two or three shops. All right, there was nothing other than military at the Pangong Lake, and any place that you have to go was possibly 6 or 8 hours of drive. I think after that, I went a crazy amount of times to Ladakh or possibly Spiti and all of these particular beautiful places. The fact is that the point where you did not have to travel because you had to show your pictures to someone was possibly one of the most beautiful places that I traveled to. So even today, I think, I used Google to actually travel to Australia way back. All right. And that was one of our first trips. And then I realized that, okay, I don't need some agency to plan out my travel. And you won't imagine that even on our honeymoon, I traveled to Arunachal Pradesh with 0 bookings with my wife. So we thought that we are going to do a place which both of us haven't seen. All right. And we are not going to do anything, any bookings, it's going to be a random thing. And we'll just travel together. And trust me, we found the best places. We found possibly something that you would want to see, where you have a blanket of snow and all of these kind of things. And the best part was you did not have to upload anything at any point of time. I mean, at this point, when Shweta tells me that, you need to upload something on Instagram, and I'm like, no, I don't need to do that. It's not a social obligation that you need to do that. But at some point, when I decided that I want to open a travel company, this was for some brief amount of time that I did open it up and all of those kind of things. But traveling is something that possibly connects each of you all to a deeper level. I found it most liberating at any point of time, and till date, Mumbai remains my transit location, which means it's. I think this is the longest time in my life that I've stayed in Mumbai. Otherwise, there's absolutely no weekend where I have not gone out. So this would classify as the longest time in my life that I've actually stayed in Mumbai.
Definitely. And going back to your agency thing, like I keep telling my mom, dad as well about like stop using an agency, but like they don't feel comfortable. But I just hate the idea where they like the agents, they set an itinerary, and like the itinerary is like, okay, you go to a location 5 minutes and then you get on the bus and you move to the next location. Like you are not exploring the place itself. You're just touching it, clicking a photo and coming back. You're not
True.
experiencing the whole place. So that's why I get like annoyed a lot. But then coming back to traveling to India, I think like I was more comfortable like Googling and finding places in US because one, like safety, and second, like I knew I would be able to get food and like I would be able to stay in a safe place. But like I personally have never thought like that could be done in India. But based on what you're telling me right now, I feel like I never explored it.
I don't think so. Anyone has seen even, I mean, possibly, I could say 30% or 40% of India. I mean, I really feel, I mean, I had been to Nagaland alone. I have been to Meghalaya, Sikkim alone. And um, the the points where I have been, or the places where I have been, I have not seen single traveler for like 6 or 7 hours that I've been trekking around those places, or I've trekked with Israeli people uh, to places which you would not find in any guidebooks or whatsoever. And those are the places where you realize that there are a crazy bunch of people who are actually in the game very much ahead of you. So when I was at a place in Nagaland called Zuku Valley, there was the head of a particular segment of MTV who was there. She was traveling alone. There was a couple from Delhi who was traveling for 27 days on a scooter. There was a group that had come in from I think Israel, two females, and six of you all who have never met each other suddenly are connected in such a way that the next half of the trip everyone is together. And that is what is possibly, I think the concept of whole solo traveler and all of these kind of things, where people feel that you have to travel alone, but that's never been the case. I mean, you find an amazing bunch of people at the most unlikeliest of places.
Newton said, "If I have seen the future, it is by standing on shoulders of the giants." We bring to you these giants in the life of our guests. Our next segment is Top 3, a curated list of top 3 recommendations from our guests.
So starting with, you said you read a lot and you like books. So we wanted to see what are your top 3 recommendations in books, and like what is the book that you've gifted the most?
Okay. I think the book that I've gifted the most is Freakonomics. Stephen Dubner and Leavitt. That's a combination that possibly everyone would love to read. So when you get the name Freakonomics, you feel that it's going to be something on economics and something like that, but you will be completely thrown off track by this particular book, because it just combines different statistics and just relates it with random things. If you want to laugh, then I think Trevor Noah is my second recommendation. The way he writes is his book is Born a Crime. And Trevor Noah, so he has this show, right? The late night show with Trevor Noah, and he is a brilliant writer. I mean, from the fact that his schooling and his particular way he was raised in South Africa and how he moved into US, and the way he's put in perspective is, when you see the Trevor Noah on the late night show, and when you read the particular book, it's like a whole two different people itself is what the feeling you would get. And I think the third, I think I would have two more recommendations. I think Sapiens, if somebody would have read it. This is a book by Yuval Noah Harari. Right. So I think one of the best reads that I've had, where every page is like an information of 1,000 sources possibly, and it just gives you a perspective of how religion plays out, how everything in mankind has played out in such a way that we are where they say that statistics say that the maximum people that you can convince to stay on one side of the argument is 150 people. All right, and imagine that religion has binded lakhs and crores of people, and this book gives you a perspective of everything that we've possibly tried to understand as to why we started eating vegetarian, how did we started becoming farming people, what exactly happened to us is this particular book. So again, a brilliant read possibly. So these are my three top recommendations. The fourth recommendation, if I can, is actually Devdatta Patnaik. It's actually because I think we could reserve this for a completely different discussion, because when I've read about Mahabharata or any of these particular thing, if the conclusion points are very very interesting and very disturbing as to when you look at it, that it was one particular thing that all the Kauravas also ended up in heaven. That is what Mahabharata says. And the second thing is that the 19 years that Duryodhan ruled over the particular kingdom, it was said that it was one of the most prosperous times, which means if we look at any of these particular things, this is history's perspective of telling a story, right? If somebody like Ravana is a god in Sri Lanka and is a villain in India, whereas possibly Ram would be the villain in Sri Lanka and would be the god in India. That's how perspective of history puts it.
Wow.
So next question, top like 3 movies or TV shows that you would recommend.
3 movies. Shawshank Redemption, I think one of my top always. Then I think it would be Hachiko, A Dog Story. Very moving. I think one of the only pictures that I've possibly cried. Beautiful picture. And Silence of the Lambs. Dangerous, but I think one of the most phenomenally put in pictures. Silence of the Lambs. Suits is definitely one. I think one that I liked the most in my childhood, which is nostalgic, is Shriman Shrimati. I don't know if you've ever even heard of this particular thing. But if you it's still on YouTube, and I think like what today's Jethalal or whatever that is to the youth of today is what that particular serial was to us. So
it's back on DD Bharati or DD National. Like I just saw it during the pandemic time. They have put it back on TV. Even Dekh Bhai Dekh. I don't know if you watched it, but even
I used to. So that for us it was like 7:30. You come to you come playing from your colony, and if you've done your homework, only then you can see these serials. So that was how strict I think everyone was when we were at school. That if you've completed your daily homework, only then you would get to watch all of these serials. So they have a very special place in our hearts. And I think possibly the third would be right now that I have been watching on this thing. So Game of Thrones and all, of course, everyone has watched through. But I think Dark was something that was a twister for me. So the whole time... the whole time travel thing and blah blah blah, just getting complicated of who's who just kept me around my nerves. So these three possibly, if everyone would want to watch.
The next question. So, sir, if you had to make if you had to tell us which are your top three investments in your life, they could be monetary or they could be even time or effort or anything. And what would those be?
My first investment was it might sound cliche, but it has been reading and knowledge. Second that comes in is the first equity share that I picked up from my scholarship that I used to get from my parents' company. So my mom was with Reserve Bank of India, and my dad was with a pharmaceutical company, and both of these people had their company that gave me a scholarship because of the fact that I had scored some amount of percentage in 10 standard, 12 standard. So I had a running scholarship that made me accumulate a good amount of money. And right from the fact that the moment I started getting it, my dad was invested in equity markets since the time he was 27. So he made sure that he put that particular money. And one of the things that he made me realize that, remember that this is your second income. This is something that you lose your sleep over. So the shares go up, the shares go down, you still have a job, and it's going to pay for everything that you need. So this is something that possibly you just need to go ahead with, all right, which just puts your money and your brain to use. So I still never look at equity as a way and means of making money, but a way and means of understanding how the international economy works. So two investments, I think: never keep your eggs in one basket. That's what I firmly believe in. Keep revenue streams always flowing from different points, and invest in reading possibly, and invest in knowledge. That's two key takeaways, I think, from me.
Unlike the name, we are dwelling deep into our guest's thought process. Rapid Fire is our next segment where our guests will answer some quirky, some weird, but mostly fun questions.
Our first question is, what is your favorite purchase that you've made which is under $100 or rupees 5,000?
Is Handicrafts of India. So this is a segment that is there in my head. The reason why I bought it was because of the fact that I wanted to do a company which specializes in travel that shows the art and craft of India. All right. So this is a book by National Institute of Design. It's curated by National Institute of Design, which has every possible documented art and craft from every corner of India. All right. So this is a book that I've still not opened, but it has a very monumental position in my library, and there is the dream that possibly that book will open up. The day that book that opens up is the day when I would want to start this company, which specifically caters to understanding the art and craft of India. So that's something that I still have to do.
So the next question: if you could invite three people for dinner and have a chat, they could be living or dead. Who would they be and why?
I think the first one would be possibly Dia Mirza. Extremely beautiful soul. When every time I see her particular posts, very, very, the kind of person who again spreads so much of positivity, is so rooted. That's one of those people that I would definitely want to invite for dinner. Second would be Trevor Noah again. For the amount of craziness that he would add to any particular conversation. And the third one, just to piss him off, possibly I would get Donald Trump on the show too.
So moving on to the next one, can you name one technology that you are excited about and you think will change the future forever?
I think the next thing that's coming up is surface computing. If I'm not mistaken, I think every surface, something that we saw in all these science fiction movies sometime back is going to be the next reality. And I am waiting for the fact where you don't need to, look at phones and keep them charged and all of that. And every possible surface is just a computing surface. So of course it just screws up our life more. But I feel that that's one of the most interesting things that will catch up in some time, where your mirror, where your surface, every possible thing is just a computing surface.
Is there any travel, any monument or any monumental place that has really disappointed you in your travel so far?
I think that would be Venice. So I had absolutely a completely different picture of Venice. But the time that I went over there, and I just felt that this was like, I mean, I actually found people from India who said, "यार इससे अच्छा तो अपना केरला का backwaters है." And these were Indian people, right? but yes, I think that's in all my travels that I've had. I think Venice was possibly monumentally disappointing because I had a completely different picture of Venice in my head. Of course, I was visiting with my family, but something that I thought was completely out of my head. I would still give it a credit that okay, it's got all of this gondolas and all of that, but it just didn't appeal to me. So big failure over there.
Our next segment is called Not the Onion, presenting 4 news articles that are mind-blowingly ridiculous that they could have been written by The Onion, a satirical news company. However, one is a fake article created by us. You have to guess which one is not The Onion.
Bundesliga games to have crowd noise, murmurs, and slurs. As the general league is one of the first leagues that has started back under the pandemic, the league board has decided to add stadium vibe back to its empty stand. After the first couple of games that were played last week with empty stands, the league has now decided to add speaker-based crowd noises in the stadium. Using technology, the stadium will be filled with loud crowd chants, murmurs, and slurs as the game progresses, as each scenario plays. This will motivate the players as to they are playing in a live stadium, said one of the officials in Bundesliga. So, second article. A grandmother is ordered to delete Facebook photos under GDPR. A woman must delete photographs of her grandchildren that she posted on Facebook and Pinterest without their parents' permission, a court in Netherlands has ruled. The judge ruled that matter was within the scope of EU's GDPR, and the GDPR does not apply to the purely personal or household processing of data. However, that exemption did not apply because posting photographs on social media made them available to a wider audience, and hence the grandmother was ordered to delete them. The third one, a woman in China sends 1,000 kilograms of onions to her ex-boyfriend to make him cry. In a bizarre incident, a heartbroken woman in China sent 1,000 kilos of onions to her ex-boyfriend as a revenge. She apparently wanted to make him cry as much as she did after their relationship ended. The girl was absolutely shattered after her boyfriend ditched her during the pandemic. They were in a relation for over a year. According to her, she spent 3 days at home crying, but when she got to know that her ex-boyfriend was not upset at all, she had decided to send him 1,000 kilograms of onions. And the fourth and the final article. A Waffle House shooter was told to wear a mask, police says. So a shooter that attempted to purchase takeout food when he was told by a cook that he could not order food without mask. The suspect allegedly returned later that night with a mask, which he was not wearing again, and was again asked to go back by the same cook. He then placed a gun on the counter and told the man, "I can blow your brains out right now," said a witness to the police. The shooter returned again for the third time on Friday and was rejected again, and he slapped the cook before opening fire. So those were the 4 articles, Mayur sir. Which one do you think is the fake one?
Okay, so I think the murmurs and slurs, I think, could pass off as true. The grandmother thing, because of the privacy rights in Europe, I think even that could pass off as true. Chinese people overall are crazy, so I think even they could possibly send 1,000 kgs of onion. So I am going with the fourth one.
Waffle House. Okay. We'll ask Hiloni. Hiloni, which one do you think is a
I think I'll go with the grandmom one.
grandmom? Okay. And Atit.
I think I'll go with third. I'll go with the fourth one, Waffle House shooter.
Waffle House shooter. So the answer is grandmother.
Oh God.
Oh,
I think this was a very amazing, I think more than 2 hours that we have recorded, and it didn't feel like time just passed by, and there was so much insight and so much new thoughts that we have gained, a very different perspective towards things which we never thought of as a student coming in from a teacher's point of view. Mayur sir, thank you so much for firstly being part of the show, and secondly adding so much value to our show. It was a pleasure to have you on board, and I believe every student and ex-student of yours would be looking forward to hearing this.
So that's about it, folks. We will be back next week with another guest and another story. We would love to hear your thoughts about the episode. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can just search What the Hat Podcast. Also, subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from, so you never miss out on the next episode. This is Hiloni, Atit, and Tapan signing off, and this was What the Hat.